When I looked out over the wedding aisle and saw that my father's seat was empty, my heart stopped for a moment. I thought maybe he was just running late, maybe stuck in traffic, or maybe there had been a mistake. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The music played softly, guests smiled politely, and my fiancé Evan stood waiting for me at the altar with love in his eyes. But all I could think about was that one empty chair, the one that was supposed to hold the man who promised to always be there for me. As I walked down the aisle, people whispered. I could feel their eyes on me, some full of pity, others confused. My chest felt heavy, but I forced myself to smile. I told myself I wouldn't let my father's absence ruin the day I had dreamed of for so long. Evan's hand was warm when he took mine, grounding me in the moment, reminding me that love was still standing in front of me even if my father was. After the ceremony, I tried not to ask where he was, but curiosity and pain got the better of me. My maid of honor finally told me what she had heard. My father wasn't sick, he wasn't delayed. He had chosen to go to my stepbrother Caleb's sports awards ceremony instead of my wedding. The words hit me like a punch. Caleb had always been the favorite, the golden boy who could do no wrong. And once again, I was reminded that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough for my father. I remember standing outside the reception hall, still in my wedding dress, staring at my phone as I waited for a message or a call that never came. Guests danced, laughed, and celebrated inside, but all I could hear was silence. The kind of silence that breaks something inside you. That night, I smiled for the photos and thanked everyone for coming, pretending everything was fine. But when I was finally alone, I let the tears fall. That was the moment I realized something deep and painful. My father didn't just miss my wedding. He chose not to be there. And that choice changed how I saw him forever. When I was little, my world revolved around my dad. After my parents split, I stayed with him on weekends, counting the days until Friday. For a while, it felt special. Just the two of us watching movies, cooking simple dinners, laughing about nothing. But everything changed when he met Sandra. She was warm at first, always smiling, but she didn't come alone. She had a son, Caleb. He was a year older than me, confident, funny, and good at everything that got attention. At first, I tried to be his friend. We played board games, did homework together, and even shared inside jokes. But slowly, I noticed how my dad's eyes lit up every time Caleb did something. Winning a game, scoring a goal, or just cracking a joke at dinner. He called him champ, clapped his back proudly, and told everyone how talented he was. When I brought home good grades or painted something at school, he smiled politely and said, "That's nice, sweetheart," before turning back to Caleb's stories. I started trying harder. I joined clubs, worked late on projects, hoping he'd notice. I thought if I could just be better, smarter, more impressive, maybe he'd look at me the way he looked at Caleb. But no matter what I did, it was like my efforts disappeared in the background noise of Caleb's success. Once, I came home excited after winning a writing contest. Before I could show him the certificate, he interrupted, saying Caleb had just made the basketball team. He didn't even ask what I'd won for. Sandra didn't help. She encouraged my dad's praise of her son and often said things like, "Caleb just has that spark, doesn't he?" I learned to stay quiet at the dinner table, watching the three of them laugh while I faded into the corner. Even when it hurt, I kept trying to be the perfect daughter, polite, responsible, never causing trouble. I thought patience and kindness would earn love someday. But every time my dad ruffled Caleb's hair or called him my boy, it reminded me that I wasn't the one he saw when he thought of family. I smiled through it all, holding on to a small, stubborn hope that maybe one day, he'd finally see me too. When Evan proposed, it felt like the start of a new chapter. He was gentle, dependable, and made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt before. For once, I believed things might finally come together, that my dad would be proud, that we could share this joy as a family. When I told him the news, he smiled wide, pulled me into a hug, and said he wanted to help with the wedding. He even offered to cover some of the costs, insisting it was his duty as my father. For a moment, I thought this was the change I had waited for my whole life. In the beginning, he seemed genuinely excited. He asked about venues, photographers, and even offered to visit a few with us. But soon, his enthusiasm faded. He started missing appointments and forgetting the details he once cared about. Each time, he had a reason. Caleb had a big game, or there was some emergency at Caleb's new job. I told myself not to take it personally, but it was impossible not to notice the pattern. Sandra became increasingly involved, too. She called often, suggesting color themes or guest lists that didn't feel like mine. She hinted that Caleb could give a speech, since he's such a natural speaker. It felt strange, like they were turning my wedding into another stage for him. Evan noticed my frustration, but he tried to keep me calm, reminding me that this was our day, no matter what they did. As the months went by, I found myself chasing my father's attention again, sending him updates, asking for opinions, trying to include him. But most of my messages went unanswered. When I finally got through, he sounded distracted, always rushing somewhere with Caleb. The few times we met, he seemed physically present but emotionally elsewhere. He'd nod along, barely listening, his eyes flicking toward his phone as if waiting for someone else to need him. It hurt, watching history repeat itself. I had thought an engagement might bring us closer, but instead, it only showed me how far apart we truly were. Evan kept me steady, reminding me I didn't need to earn anyone's approval to deserve happiness. Still, a quiet ache stayed with me, whispering that even on my happiest days, my father's attention was always somewhere else. The week before the wedding felt strange from the start. Everyone around me was buzzing with excitement, but something inside me felt uneasy. My dad had been quiet for days. He stopped answering my messages, and when I finally got Sandra on the phone, her voice was calm but distant. She said he was busy helping Caleb with something important. I wanted to ask what could possibly be more important than my wedding, but I bit my tongue. I had learned long ago that asking too much only led to disappointment. Each day that passed made the silence heavier. Evan noticed it too. He kept trying to reassure me, saying maybe my dad was planning a surprise, but I knew better. The night before the ceremony, I called one last time. No answer. I left a message, my voice trembling as I told him how much it would mean to have him. I didn't sleep much that night, just lay awake staring at the ceiling, praying he'd show up. The morning came bright and warm, but my stomach was in knots. My maid of honor, Claire, kept checking her phone, her smile fading each time she looked at me. When she finally walked over, I could see something was wrong. She hesitated, then whispered that she had just received a message. My father wasn't coming. He was across town, attending Caleb's sports award ceremony. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Everyone around me kept talking, but their voices blurred together. I managed a nod, pretending to be okay. Makeup artists worked quietly, avoiding my eyes. When it was time to walk down the aisle, I took a deep breath and stepped forward alone. The music played softly. Every step echoed in my chest. I kept my head high, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Evan's face was the only thing that kept me steady. He looked at me with such warmth that, for a moment, the pain softened. But deep down, I knew this was the moment everything changed. The empty seat in the front row said it all. My father had made his choice, and it wasn't me. 2 days after the wedding, I finally gathered the courage to face him. My hands shook as I drove to his house, replaying every moment of that day in my head. I had spent years staying quiet, hoping things would change, but this time I couldn't. I needed to hear him say why. I needed to know how a father could so easily turn his back on his own daughter. When he opened the door, he looked surprised, almost annoyed. He didn't even seem guilty. "Lena, you should have called," he said, like I was just stopping by for a casual visit. I stood there, holding my breath, fighting the anger boiling inside me. "Why weren't you there?" I asked. My voice came out calm, too calm. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck like the question was exhausting. "Caleb needed me more that day," he said finally. "You had Evan. You weren't alone." Those words cut deeper than I expected. My wedding day, the day he had promised to walk me down the aisle, had been reduced to an afterthought. I stared at him, trying to understand how he could say it so easily. "Needed you more?" I repeated quietly. "Do you have any idea what that day meant to me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he started explaining how Caleb had worked so hard, how that award was once in a lifetime. "You have your own life now," he added, as if that excused everything. Something inside me snapped. I had spent my entire life trying to make him proud, and here he was, telling me my biggest moment didn't matter. I told him I was done chasing his approval, done trying to be enough. His face hardened. He crossed his arms and muttered, "You're being dramatic." The way he said it made my chest tighten. He didn't see the pain, the years of being overlooked, the quiet heartbreak that came with every choice he made. To him, I was just overreacting again. I realized then that he would never understand. I turned to leave, my throat burning, but I didn't cry. I just walked out, closing the door behind me. That sound, the soft click of the door shutting, felt like the end of something I had been holding on to my whole life. After that day, I stopped reaching out. No more calls, no more messages, no more waiting for him to suddenly care. Evan and I packed up our things and moved to a small town a few hours away, a quiet place surrounded by open fields and kind neighbors who didn't know anything about my past. It was peaceful there, the kind of peace that feels almost fragile. We built a little house together, painted the walls ourselves, and started fresh. From the outside, everything looked perfect, but inside me, something still ached. The silence between my father and me stretched on like a wall I couldn't climb. At first, I kept expecting him to reach out, to apologize, to show even a trace of guilt. But the days turned into months and nothing came. Sandra called a few times, leaving polite messages that I never returned. Her words always sounded rehearsed, like she was just doing it to ease her own conscience. I didn't want to hear about Caleb or how family should stick together. I had heard enough of that to last a lifetime. Holidays came and went without a single card or call. I stopped looking at my phone, stopped checking social media where I might see pictures of them smiling together. Still, whispers reached me through distant relatives, comments that Rick thought I was being unreasonable, that Caleb felt I was bitter. Those words used to sting, but after a while they just made me stronger. If standing up for myself made me bitter, then maybe bitterness was what I needed to finally move on. Evan did his best to fill the emptiness I carried. He reminded me that love wasn't supposed to hurt, that I didn't owe anyone my forgiveness. I threw myself into building a life with him, fixing up the house, planting a small garden, finding work I enjoyed. The world started to feel bigger again, not defined by my father's shadow. Still, some nights, I would lie awake and wonder if he ever thought about me. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Either way, I wasn't the same woman he once ignored. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was building something real, something lasting, a life that proved I could stand tall, even without his love. Almost a year passed before I heard anything about them again. Life in the small town had settled into a calm rhythm, quiet mornings, steady work, dinners with Evan on the porch. Then one evening, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was Sandra. Her words were polite but desperate. She said things had been difficult, that Rick's business was struggling, and Caleb had made some bad choices that caused serious trouble. She said my father missed me, that he talked about me often, and that maybe it was time to reconnect. I stared at the message for a long time. A part of me wanted to delete it and pretend it never came. But another part, the one that still carried old wounds, wanted to see them again, not for comfort, but for closure. I wasn't looking for apologies anymore. I just wanted to look them in the eye and finally let go of everything I'd been holding. When I told Evan, he looked uneasy. He didn't try to stop me, but he asked me to think carefully. If you go, he said gently, make sure it's not to open old scars. I promised him it wasn't. But deep inside, I knew I hadn't completely healed. No matter how far I had come, the pain still lived quietly inside me. A few days later, I packed a small bag and drove back to the city I'd left behind. The streets felt both familiar and foreign. I passed places that held old memories, the park where my dad once pushed me on a swing, the cafe where we used to sit on Sundays before everything fell apart. It was strange how time could change so much and yet leave the hurt untouched. When I finally pulled up to their house, I hesitated before getting out. The yard looked unkempt, the windows dull. It was a house that had lost its shine, just like the people inside it. I wasn't there to save anyone or fix what was broken. I was there to face the truth I'd been avoiding, that love without respect always crumbles, and sometimes the only way to move forward is to go back one last time. When I stepped inside the house, the air felt heavy, like time itself had stopped. The place that once looked so full of life now seemed worn down and tired. The furniture was old, the walls dull, and even the photos on the shelves looked faded. My father sat in the living room, hunched over, staring at the floor. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders slumped, his hair grayer than I remembered. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. Caleb was there too, pacing back and forth with his phone in hand, his face pale and restless. He barely glanced at me before muttering something about debts and lawyers. It was strange seeing him like that. The confident man who had once been the center of attention now looked lost. Sandra hovered nearby, trying to calm him, but it was clear that whatever had fallen apart between them went deeper than money. My father finally looked up, his eyes tired but soft. "Lena," he said quietly, like saying my name took effort. I didn't answer at first. I just watched him, waiting for something real to come out of his mouth. After a long silence, he began to speak. He said things had been hard lately, that he never meant to hurt me, that he was sorry if his choices had caused pain. He called it a misunderstanding, a mistake he couldn't undo. When I asked why he did it, why he had chosen to go somewhere else instead of being there for me, he sighed. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said. "Caleb needed me more that day. I made the best choice I could at the time." Hearing those words again made my chest tighten. It was the same excuse, the same way of brushing off my feelings as if they were small. I looked at him and spoke calmly, without anger. I told him that the moment he decided to choose Caleb over me was the moment he lost me as his daughter. There was no shouting, no tears, just truth. For once, he didn't have anything to say. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. The silence that followed said everything. I stood up, took one last look around, and knew I would never come back. After that last visit, I let go completely. The pain that used to burn inside me slowly turned into something steadier, quiet determination. Evan and I threw ourselves into building the small business we had dreamed about for years. It started as a simple idea, just the two of us working side by side, taking chances and learning as we went. The first few months were hard, but we didn't give up. Little by little, things began to grow. Customers kept coming back, neighbors spread the word, and soon our place became part of the community. People respected us for our honesty and hard work, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself without needing anyone's approval. Our days were busy but fulfilling. Evan always said success wasn't about money or recognition. It was about peace, about knowing you built something real. I understood that now. The laughter that filled our home wasn't forced anymore. It was genuine, light, and free from the shadows of the past. Word of our success eventually reached the city I had left behind. Distant relatives called to congratulate me, their voices filled with surprise. Not long after, I received a letter from my father. His handwriting was shaky, the words awkward. He said he had heard about the business, that he was proud, and that maybe we could start over. I read it once, quietly, then folded it and set it aside. I didn't feel anger anymore, just clarity. He was reaching out now because he saw what I had become, not because he had finally understood what he had done. I didn't owe him another chance to disappoint me. So instead of writing a long response, I sent one short note back. Family shows up. You didn't. There was no satisfaction in hurting him, only peace in knowing I had finally moved past needing him. My success wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could build a beautiful life without the person who made me feel invisible. That was my quiet revenge, one built not on bitterness, but on strength, love, and the life he would never truly know. Years passed, and life moved forward in ways I could never have imagined. The small business Evan and I built continued to thrive, and our home became a place filled with laughter, warmth, and peace. We had a circle of friends who felt more like family than the one I was born into. They were the kind of people who showed up, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Around them, I never had to pretend to be okay. I could simply be myself, and that was enough. With time, the sharpness of old wounds faded. I stopped replaying those painful moments in my head. I no longer felt anger toward my father, only a quiet understanding that some people are not capable of the love we expect from. Letting go wasn't easy, but it brought me freedom. I didn't need his apology anymore. I had built a life that spoke louder than any words he could have offered. When our daughter, Emily, was born, something inside me healed. Holding her for the first time, I made a silent promise. She would never question her worth, never wonder if she mattered. Every smile, every bedtime story, every small moment with her reminded me of the love I had missed and the love I was now able to give. One evening, years later, I sat in a school auditorium watching Emily perform in her first recital. The lights were bright, her little hands trembled slightly, but she looked out into the crowd until her eyes met mine. I smiled and waved, and she relaxed, her face glowing with confidence. That single look between us carried everything: trust, security, and love. As the applause filled the room, I felt tears slide down my cheeks, not from sadness but from peace. I had finally broken the cycle. The girl who once stood alone in a church, waiting for a father who never came, was now a woman who showed up, always. I didn't need to forgive to find peace. I just needed to love better than I was loved. And sitting there, watching my daughter beam with pride, I knew I had kept my promise. Hey besties, thanks for staying with me till the end of this emotional journey. Imagine your own father skipping your wedding for someone else. Heartbreaking, right? But sometimes pain becomes the fire that shapes our strength and helps us build the life we deserve. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time. Bye!